Reading today is from Matthew 18:15-20. If your brother or sister sins against you, go and point out that fault when the two of you are alone. If you're listened to, you've regained that one. But if you're not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of two or three witnesses. If that person refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. If the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile or a tax collector. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I truly tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by God in heaven. For where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there among them.
Well, Bob read that so well, I think I'm done. So there's the message. Goodbye, everyone. Just kidding. I'd like to start this morning with a question that might not resonate with everyone, but just, if you can, just be honest. By show of hands, perhaps, has anyone here today ever had their feelings hurt? Oh my gosh, overwhelmingly. Okay. It's kind of a long shot that we might have something in common, but I feel like if there are universal human experiences, heartache and hurt feelings are in the top 5. And because even our church is comprised of humans, and because we don't do church in a vacuum, but we do church in the midst of the rest of our lives. We carry our anxiety and our stress and our insomnia into our interactions with our siblings. And because each of us care so deeply about our faith and our church and the well-being and the preservation of our community, sometimes our tongues can be sharp. Sometimes we can take a comment very personally. And we can move into a mental space where we are not communicating particularly well, where we are sad or we are discouraged or we are disengaged or we are angry. I'm going to start with the positive side of those feelings. It means that we actually care. It means we care about each other. It means we care about our community. If someone or something is entirely irrelevant to you, it really won't matter to you what they say. You cannot take it personally. If you are upset with someone just because they want to, change the communion bread recipe. Cam's not here, but Cam, if you're watching, that's just an example. The bread is delicious. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about it. See, gotta be careful. That means that we have gained meaning and beauty and inspiration from communion and think perhaps there is no way to enhance that experience further. These feelings mean we love Trinity. It means we want to engage with others in even more ways that we and they can be impacted by the beauty of this fellowship. And now that we've gotten the positive side entirely out of the way, let's get down to the real talk. This verse, this reading, this action is hard. It's stupidly hard. And if it weren't stupidly hard for us, we wouldn't need religion or ethics or 12-step programs. It's really hard to navigate communication when your feelings are hurt. It's really hard to navigate a conversation when you have hurt another person. In short, it is really hard to shake it off or to toast to those who have hurt us, because forgiveness is a nice thing to do. It is much easier to do, well, anything other than go to the person who has hurt your feelings and candidly say to them, hey, that wasn't cool. In thinking about the passage this week, I started to wonder about the very nature of the reconciliation that Jesus is talking about in this verse, and how perhaps it is so very difficult for us to go to someone who has hurt us because it is risking vulnerability in a position where we already feel unsafe. There's not a lot, at least in my experience as an old millennial, there's not a lot of organic conflict resolution training that happens in our lives. And by the time we need to really start practicing these things, we've already learned that opening ourselves up to further hurt when we're already feeling beaten down is truly terrifying. Further, the world teaches us that we each are to be impenetrable, that to admit pain would classify us as weak. We delude ourselves into thinking that if someone hurts our feelings and we admit that, it puts them in a position of power. They are strong and we are weak. So we don't feel our pain. We choke it down and mask it with anger. We strike out and let our resentments brew until we are emotionally exhausted and cannot function. And that's just from the conversations we've made up in the shower. Thank God I'm not alone in that, okay. In my studies this week, I came across a text that exemplifies the ways in which humanity tends to do conflict on their own terms. The song, Look What You Made Me Do, by American poet Taylor Swift. It's a bop, don't get me wrong. However, we see in the very title, Look What You Made Me Do, a way in which we can absolve ourselves of our behavior because we were provoked into it. This is avoidable when we own our hurt and overcome our ego. And then the bridge, I don't trust nobody and nobody trusts me, can be super fun to scream sing when you're sitting on Mopac. But it also demonstrates the callousness that can build on our hearts when we do nothing to relieve the resentments that brew inside of us. I could go on and on. Trust me, each line of this song offers us something. It's certainly not something that we want to live by, though, as we are called into risking vulnerability for the sake of tender and honest relationships with one another. Back to the text that's not Taylor Swift. This situation in the Bible is not the first or the last time that Jesus encourages folks to risk that vulnerability. It's not the first or the last time that we hear that our instincts might be off, that we are supposed to live in ways that are maybe different from the ways we've been conditioned to think. And here's where it gets a little deeper even. It's not just that we need to be mature and calm and handle our conflicts well. Friends, it's that we need to be gentle with those who we have perceived as sinning against us. We need to try to resolve it one-on-one first. Then we need to try to resolve it with witnesses. Then we can bring the offender to church. Because what if the person who's offended you needs community just as much as you do? What if the person who has sinned against you is perhaps more in need of community and compassion than you could possibly imagine in your hurt and your anger and your frustration? And I wonder if we could perhaps reimagine this bringing the person to the church And Trinity is actually a great spatial place for us to reimagine this. Because what if we imagine that person, instead of bringing a person to stand in the chancel alone with everyone thinking about their perceived crimes out here, what if we imagined that person sitting at this table? What if we imagined that person sitting at that table surrounded quite literally by people who are seeking to understand why there was offense, seeking to love someone out of their defiance and folding them into relationship, seeking reconciliation and rehabilitation instead of retribution? Jesus then tells us that if the person does not respond to the church, then you've done all you can and you have to move on, which is valid and healthy. We are certainly not holding anyone hostage here. But what is key to the next part of that statement is just exactly how important it is for us to take what we do as community seriously. Whatever decisions we make, particularly about errant members of our community or how to handle situations, whatever it is that we do, when we decide to speak versus when we decide to be silent, when we rebuke or we reprimand or we get defensive or assertive or we experience grace or humility, these things really matter, not just to the relationship that we're one-on-one dealing with at that point. They matter because we have authority as the church. I don't know about y'all, but I have experienced church hurt and church trauma. And I do know that several of you have shared that you have also had those experiences. I want us to acknowledge that perhaps there are only very few of us who haven't. Trinity is not exactly the kind of community that attracts folks who've had perfect interactions with traditional churches. And that makes our space so sacred and so precious. We know the authority that these spaces hold in our lives, and we know the hurt that we can heap upon each other's. And it can sting in ways because we are the church that are not just human-shaped or pastor-shaped, but they're God-shaped hurts. Friends, we have come through these experiences stronger and more ready to experience community and divinity. And because of that, we owe it to each other to risk vulnerability, to admit where we've been wrong individually and corporately. And most importantly, we owe it to ourselves to keep our sides of the street clean. When we aren't able to avoid offense, let's have faith that our community will gather around us and tend to us with care and compassion and grace, so that we can see our error and move forward smarter, wiser, and kinder, that we're all able to shake it off, as it were. Friends, we owe these things to one another because we are due these things from one another as a community of faith, as a merry bunch of misfits that is just wacky enough to live into these teachings to make the world a better place. Siblings, let's practice these principles because wherever we are gathered together, the divine is present there among us. And with one another, we can do anything. And friends, that is good news.